This is a news on Bakhtiar Sanova, and let's go through the main headlines. Trump declares US-Iran peace deal all signed as G7 leaders battle to tie up loose ends. Second day of G7 summit is underway in France with global leaders holding discussions. And 8 people die after US Air Force B-52 bomber crashes in California. To France now, where G7 leaders are closing ranks on Ukraine, agreeing to increase pressure on Russia while pushing for a path to peace. At the same time, the summit has expanded its focus to the Middle East, with key regional and global leaders joining talks in France. Here is more.
Leaders of the Group of 7 gathered for a crucial second day of talks in Évian-les-Bains, France, hosted by French President Emmanuel Macron. The summit focused on 2 major issues: strengthening support for Ukraine and addressing the crisis in the Middle East. Leaders from Brazil, India, Kenya and South Korea joined discussions alongside the G7 nations and the European Union. A French diplomatic source said G7 leaders agreed during what were described as very productive talks on Ukraine to remain united in their support for Kyiv and increase pressure on Russia. Leaders also agreed to pursue tougher sanctions targeting Russia's oil and gas sectors. US President Donald Trump said Russia should make a peace deal with Ukraine and pledged to do what he could to help end the war.
And we'll see how. I spoke with President Putin on Sunday. And it's sort of the same thing. I mean, they just keep going, fighting, losing soldiers. They lose so many soldiers. This is not since World War II has anything like this happened. I settled 8 wars. This was the one I thought was going to be the easiest settled. There's a lot of dislike between the 2 leaders.
Trump met Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky during a working session and later held additional talks with him on the sidelines of the summit. Following the talks with Trump, Zelensky said Ukraine hopes to secure US licenses to produce anti-ballistic air defense systems and missiles.
I raised the topic of licenses. I addressed it to President Trump. We need licenses to produce missiles. We have capabilities different. It's difficult to produce Patriot systems and missiles. Yes, I know. I had a lot of, believe me, I had a lot of meetings and calls with Raytheon, with the company, with their management CEOs, and etc. I know. I'm deeply in this topic, but in any way, we want to increase their production if they will be okay, and if President Trump will support this idea. But now he was positive.
The summit also widened its focus beyond Europe. Macron welcomed the leaders of the United Arab Emirates, Egypt and Qatar for discussions expected to center on the Middle East crisis. Meanwhile, Trump defended a preliminary agreement with Iran, saying it ensures Tehran will never be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon. He also said he has a strong relationship with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, but urged Israel to act more responsibly in Lebanon, adding that he was unhappy with recent actions in Beirut, while efforts continue to reach a broader deal with Iran.
Diplomatic efforts are entering a critical phase, with Washington and Tehran preparing for talks that could determine whether a temporary pause in fighting leads to a wider settlement. The discussions come as regional tensions remain high, especially over Lebanon and Israel's role in the conflict.
It brought us, these countries...
US President Donald Trump has defended an interim agreement with Iran, saying Tehran will not be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon. Speaking on Tuesday on the sidelines of the G7 summit in France, Trump said the still unpublished Memorandum of Understanding was clear on the issue.
The one thing that's happening that's of note, frankly, the only thing that really matters to me, is Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. And it says it loud and clear. They're not going to develop it, they're not going to buy it, they're not going to do anything with it. And if they do, they suffer unbelievable consequences. Not just a little bit like, I won't even tell you the consequences, but the consequences are the ultimate consequences. And with that being said, I hope we have a very good relationship. But the biggest thing is they will not have a nuclear weapon. And that's the reason I got in, and that's the reason I agreed to sign.
Trump also warned that all hell will rain down on Iran if it tried to acquire a nuclear weapon. The agreement is expected to be formally signed in Geneva on Friday, when US and Iranian officials begin 60 days of negotiations on nuclear issues, sanctions relief, and regional security. Vice President J.D. Vance described the memorandum as about a page and a half and very general. He said the document had already been virtually signed by Trump and himself, while Iran's side was signed by Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said the talks had been divided into two phases because of the difficulty of reaching an agreement after what he called US and Israeli aggression against Iran.
In the first phase, the most important issue is the announcement of the end of the war, and based on the decision we made, from the morning of Monday, the end of the war was also announced. However, the official commencement of this Memorandum of Understanding will be on Friday. Nevertheless, the announcement of the end of the war took place from Monday morning, and this is perhaps the most important issue contained in this memorandum, the announcement of an immediate and permanent end to the war.
Israel has not directly participated in the US-Iran talks. Trump also said he was not happy with Israel's handling of Lebanon while he was trying to reach a deal with Iran. In one of his first comments on the agreement, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he and Trump do not always see eye to eye.
A fire has broken out at an oil depot in southern Russia after drone debris fell on the site. It happened a day after a major Russian attack damaged the historic monastery in Kiev. Meanwhile, diplomatic efforts to end the war continue, with US President Donald Trump saying he believes both sides may be open to talks.
Ukraine and Russia have exchanged fresh long-range attacks as fighting continues despite renewed diplomatic efforts to end the war. Russia's defense ministry said it destroyed 172 Ukrainian drones overnight into Tuesday across multiple regions, including around Moscow, the Black Sea, the Sea of Azov, and Russian-annexed Crimea. In southern Russia's Krasnodar region, authorities said drone debris caused a fire at an oil depot near Crimea. No casualties were reported. Meanwhile, on Monday, Russia launched a major overnight missile and drone attack on Ukraine. In Kiev, at least 5 people were killed and dozens injured. The strikes also damaged the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra Monastery, a UNESCO World Heritage Site founded nearly 1,000 years ago. It is seen as one of Ukraine's most important religious landmarks. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited the monastery and described the attack as a blow to Ukraine's history and culture. Russia denied targeting the site and said it had been damaged by a Ukrainian air defense missile. Ukrainian security officials said debris recovered at the scene indicated a Russian drone. In Ukraine's second-largest city, Kharkiv, a strike killed 5 emergency responders who had arrived to handle an earlier attack. Ukrainian officials said the rescuers were struck while responding to a fire at what they described as a civilian packaging facility. The exchanges came as leaders gathered for the G7 summit in France. Zelensky, who is due to attend the summit, said he had recently spoken with US President Donald Trump and offered direct talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump said he believed both leaders were open to discussions on ending the war, although any breakthrough has yet to happen.
Global attention is focused on the G7 summit in Evian-les-Bains, France, where leaders are grappling with the implications of a tentative US-Iran agreement that could reopen the Strait of Hormuz, ease energy market pressures, and launch a new round of nuclear negotiations. At the same time, this summit is addressing Russia's war in Ukraine, regional security in the Middle East, global energy stability, critical minerals, and the governance of artificial intelligence. The presence of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and the leaders of Egypt, Qatar, and the UAE underscores the growing overlap between European, Middle Eastern, and global security challenges. To help us unpack the key developments and the diplomatic dynamics unfolding at this year's summit, I'm joined by John Kavulik, senior editor of Issue Insights, speaking to us from Evian-les-Bains, France. Mr. Kavolik, welcome to the program. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you. Mr. Kavolik, you are on the ground in Evian. What is the mood among leaders and diplomats as the summit enters its most critical discussions?
The word to best describe the G7 thus far is uncertain, and in a subtext would be confusion, because there are simply too many issues that are put before these 7 heads of state, along with the head of the European Commission and European Union, where there's time to digest the issues and then try to craft solutions. There isn't enough time in the day for the sessions that they're having, for the length of the sessions, for the protocols, the family photos, the welcoming, which takes hours, as opposed to meeting. And so, I'm not optimistic that we're going to see anything substantial. And one of the basis for my thinking is there's not going to be a communique signed by all the governments. There are going to be pieces of one. And so there's a lot of disagreement amongst the 7 plus the other 2.
Mr. Kavolik, how much has the US-Iran agreement overshadowed the rest of the G7 agenda? Because many leaders say they still lack clarity on the details of the agreement. What are the main questions they want answered?
The big question is the text. Everyone wants to see the text. And the United States has said, Vice President J.D. Vance has said it's going to be out soon, but no one has seen the text. But what we have seen is the United States say, this is in the text. The Iranian government say, this is in the text. And it's not aligning. So the text is going to be interesting. The other reality is this is not a peace treaty. It's not even a peace agreement. It's an interim agreement to provide time for other steps and other negotiations for another agreement. And so the members of the G7, or the 6 minus the US, they're skeptical simply because President Trump tends to exaggerate. And since they don't have the text, all they have left to go on is his history. And the history is he tends to exaggerate and say what he wants over and over again, hoping that eventually it becomes reality.
Mr. Kavolik, what role are Egypt, Qatar and the UAE expected to play in shaping the next phase of regional diplomacy?
Having them there is, they're all integral because of real estate in terms of Iran, in terms of Israel and their relationship with the United States and relationship with the European Union. President Trump was focused when he was meeting with the head of state, which is they're investing billions and hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars. And that's basically his focus. He talked about the UAE as a poster child for the Abraham Accords, which other countries just aren't going to sign on to. Particularly, we're not talking about the 70,000+ people that have been killed in Gaza. We're now talking about the Israel-U.S.-Iran war. So it's good that they're there, particularly for President Trump, so he gets more face time with them, and they feel more inclusive. But it's not going to mean a tremendous amount, particularly for a country like Egypt, because the issues, although involve Egypt, they're really not. Egypt's not directly involved.
And how is Israel reacting to the emerging agreement, and what impact could Israeli concerns have on its implementation?
The relationship between the U.S. and Israel is, I guess, strange would be the word, where President Trump has been quoted and has confirmed some very colorful language he's used during conversations with Prime Minister Netanyahu. and also about Prime Minister Netanyahu. Prime Minister Netanyahu has said, well, we sometimes disagree, but we continue to love each other. And President Trump has said there would be no Israel today if it wasn't for him. Israel wouldn't exist. And so that's a challenging relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu announcing he's going to run again. That election has to take place by the end of October, which is right before the U.S. midterm elections for the Congress. Israel's not popular in the U.S. That could influence the U.S. election. And then the European Union has been gutless in terms of implementing any sanctions toward Israel for Gaza, for the bombing of Iran, but particularly for Gaza, for issues relating to the cabinet of Prime Minister Netanyahu, some of the words that used, some of the actions they've taken in the occupied West Bank, and the EU has just done nothing. The toughest language they had was, well, maybe we shouldn't allow Israel in the Eurovision contest. So it's a sore point amongst the members, and then amongst the visitors from the Gulf countries and President El-Sisi. They're looking at it that basically Israel can do what it wants, and there's never any accountability, and that's pretty depressing.
President Donald Trump says attention can now shift back to Ukraine. Do G7 leaders believe Washington remains fully committed to supporting Kiev?
They don't believe that President Trump is fully supportive of how they perceive Ukraine should position itself, how they perceive Russia should make decisions and concessions, and how they perceive the United States shouldn't be a mediator. The United States should be on the side of the table with them and with Ukraine. So it is, it's nice rhetorical flourishes that we're going to start talking about Ukraine, and President Trump has said, now I've solved Iran. But he also said that after Iran was going to come Cuba, and Cuba is a domestic U.S. political issue. So that's an important one. He's lessened his interest with respect to Ukraine because the U.S. taxpayers are no longer supporting Ukraine. Any military equipment that Ukraine is getting, either NATO allies or European Union countries are purchasing from the United States. So it's a money maker in some respects. It's more of a regional conflict. President Trump always says there's 3,000 miles of ocean between us and you. This is really your problem. The European Union keeps saying that Ukraine's going to be a member of the European Union. And so for President Trump, it's like, fine, you take the lead. The challenge is that the European Union now says, well, the negotiations were Russia and Ukraine. Then it was Russia, Ukraine, and the U.S. Now we want Russia, Ukraine, U.S., and the European Union. Maybe NATO, but probably European Union. So now we've gone from 2 people negotiating, 3 people negotiating, to add 27. Now we've got 30 people in the room. And somehow the European Commission in Brussels believes this is going to help bring about an end to the war, when now you've got to convince 30 people as opposed to 2 or 3.
Mr. Kabulik, artificial intelligence has also emerged as a major summit topic. Why has AI become a strategic issue for G7 leaders this year?
Primarily, AI is an issue because the U.S. is AI. U.S. companies control the marketplace. And increasingly, companies want to use AI. They don't need to, but they want to because for competitive issues. The challenge there is that they need to purchase those services from U.S. companies, and that means the EU needs to purchase them. NATO members that aren't EU members need to purchase them. And Asia, Japan, wants to purchase them. And so the president looks at everything as leverage. He knows that these are very important tools, and companies are willing, and governments are willing to pay a lot of money for them. But increasingly, he's being faced with the reality that AI can be dangerous, and that the technology well, I guess in some respects, the AI technology is growing internally. It's learning on its own faster than the human programmers can figure out the potential leaks to it, the prevent overrides, misuse. And we've seen one, Anthropic, where the U.S. government last week said, "Oh, hold everything with this new service because we want to get a handle of it." So AI is, everyone's talking about it. Everyone's sort of fearful of it. Also with the implications for employment, that it may lessen job opportunities. But right now, everyone knows that they've got to face it. And in some respects, you take the Israel-Iran U.S. war, you take Russia-Ukraine war, and you then take AI and look at all three of them and which one has the potential to do far more damage for far longer, and that is AI. And so that's the one that the G7 truly should be focusing on.
And finally, looking ahead, what would constitute a successful outcome for this summit? And what concrete deliverables should we watch for in the coming days?
Well, the successful summit, we're a very low common denominator. So it basically is President Trump hasn't insulted anyone publicly. He hasn't left early. And he hasn't demanded anything publicly that makes everyone uncomfortable. So thus far, we're 3-0. Deliverables, there really just aren't going to be any that are truly tangible, because it's unwise, but it's also not being candid to say that well, a deliverable is the U.S. is interested in Ukraine again. I mean, my God, if that is considered a deliverable, we're all in a lot of trouble, because that isn't a surprise. And so I don't think that we're going to have many of the diplomatic deliverables out of here, other than everyone came, they met, and thus far, as of day 2, we still have the rest of today, an evening dinner, and then we have tomorrow to the early afternoon. President Trump has more bilaterals. There are more group meetings, and we'll see if all this lasts.
Jan Kavulik, thank you very much for your insights and for joining us from Evian-le-Bas. We greatly appreciate your time and expertise. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll continue with the main stories of the day after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to A News. U.S. Air Force B-52 bomber crashed shortly after takeoff in California, killing all 8 people on board. An investigation is underway, but officials say it could take months before the cause is known. Here is more.
A US Air Force B-52 Stratofortress bomber crashed Monday shortly after takeoff from Edwards Air Force Base in California's Mojave Desert, killing all 8 people on board. The crew included a mix of military personnel, government civilians and defence contractors. The 8-engine bomber was conducting a routine test flight in support of a radar modernisation program when it went down moments after departure, bursting into flames and sending a massive plume of black smoke into the sky. Speaking at a news briefing, Colonel James Hayes, Deputy Commander of the 412th Test Wing, said first responders moved quickly to secure the crash site and begin firefighting efforts.
It was a B-52 that was on initial takeoff, supporting the radar modernization program, which is it was a local test sortie. It took off and immediately after takeoff crashed and burst into flames. Our team of first responders snapped into action and immediately cordoned off the area and took the appropriate action to start putting out the flames. While that was taking place, our base responded in kind to establish an emergency operations center, and a wing operations center to ensure that the command and control of all base agencies and the response for the recovery effort was underway.
Hayes said a formal military investigation is now underway, but findings are not expected to be released publicly for approximately 6 months. The B-52 Stratofortress is one of the oldest aircraft still in service with the US Air Force, having entered service in 1955. Designed as a long-range heavy bomber, it can carry up to 70,000 pounds of conventional and nuclear munitions. The aircraft has played a key role in numerous military operations over the decades and remains a central component of America's strategic bomber fleet.
Moldova and Ukraine have officially begun accession negotiations with the European Union on Monday, marking a major milestone in their bid to join the bloc. Meeting in Luxembourg, EU member states opened the first chapter of talks focused on democratic reforms, the rule of law and fundamental rights. European leaders hailed the move as a strategic step for peace and stability, while the two countries described it as a powerful endorsement of the European aspirations, despite ongoing regional challenges. Georgia and Serbia are moving closer to signing a free trade agreement as Serbian President Alexander Vučić made his first ever presidential visit to Tbilisi.
Georgia and Serbia are nearing a free trade agreement. Both governments say only a few issues remain before the deal can be signed. The announcement came during a landmark visit by Serbian President Alexander Vučić to Tbilisi, the first time a Serbian head of state has visited Georgia. Speaking alongside Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze, Vučić said bilateral trade grew by 36.4% in the first quarter of the year. He added that growth in tourism and services has also picked up, helped by direct flights between the two countries. Kobakhidze said the trade agreement would benefit both economies and help deepen ties. The two leaders also discussed transport and logistics cooperation. Kobakhidze highlighted Georgia's role in the Middle Corridor, linking Europe and Asia. Serbia's decision to open an embassy in Tbilisi was described by both sides as a significant step, with Vučić saying that he hopes Georgia will open an embassy in Serbia as well. On European integration, Kobakhidze said the two countries share a common vision and face similar challenges and agreed that closer coordination and cooperation would be useful going forward. Vučić addressed Georgia's economic performance, citing first quarter growth of 9.3% and a 12% rise in construction. He thanked Georgia for its support on sovereignty and territorial integrity issues. During the visit, the Serbian leader also met with Georgian President Mihail Avalashvili and Catholicos Patriarch Shio III, the new head of the Georgian Orthodox Church. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A-News.
Azerbaijan has been elected to the UN Human Rights Committee for the 2027 to 2030 term. The vote took place in New York during the 42nd meeting of states parties to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Azerbaijan's candidate Fuad Zarbiev won election in the first round with the support of 131 states. Candidates from 16 countries competed for 9 seats on the committee, which monitors implementation of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. The United Nations Security Council has unanimously voted to extend its mission in Afghanistan for another year until June 17, 2027. The extension means the UN will continue to support its humanitarian, human rights and political role in the country. The decision comes as Afghanistan faces a deepening humanitarian crisis and continuing international concern over restrictions on women and girls. Our correspondent Tamim Bahiz has the details from Kabul.
The United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan, known as UNAMA, will now remain in place for another year. All 15 members of the Security Council supported the resolution drafted by China during a meeting in New York on Monday. The extension allows UNAMA to continue coordinating humanitarian aid, monitoring human rights, engaging with the authorities here in Kabul and reporting developments to the Security Council. The Council has also requested a strategic review of the mission. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres is expected to present its findings by the end of March next year. The United States welcomed the planned review, but said the mission must become more streamlined and effective. Washington also called on the Taliban to fulfill counter-terrorism commitments, respect human rights, and release detained Americans. China's ambassador to the UN, Fu Song, said UNAMA continued to play an important role in coordinating international assistance and facilitating a dialogue. However, he warned that restrictions that prevent Afghan women who work for the UN from entering UN premises seriously affects the work of UN agencies. The Taliban has not yet publicly responded to the latest decision. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
The Bank of Japan has raised interest rates to its highest level in 31 years as it moves to contain widening price pressures. The central bank lifted its short-term policy rate from 0.75% to 1%, the first hike since December. Deputy Governor Shinichi Uchida said downturn risks had eased, but inflation could move away from target. He said the Bank of Japan will keep monitoring Middle East developments, oil distribution and currency movements before making further policy decisions. The reopening of the Strait of Hormuz may not be enough to restore balance to global oil markets. A new report warns disruption to energy supplies could linger, with Europe among the regions at risk.
A new report by Bruegel says imbalance in the global oil market is expected to continue through 2027, despite any reopening of the key shipping route. The European think tank says the US-Israeli war against Iran has severely disrupted the Strait of Hormuz, triggering what it describes as the largest energy supply shock in history. In 2025, around 15 million barrels of crude oil and 5 million barrels of petroleum products passed through the strait each day, roughly 1/5 of global supply. Since shipping was disrupted, the International Energy Agency estimates a daily shortfall of 12.8 million barrels, the largest supply gap on record. Concerns over Europe's jet fuel supplies are also mounting. Goldman Sachs and S&P Global have warned of difficult summer supply prospects, while inventories have already shrunk significantly. Even if the strait reopens soon, the report says restarting oil fields and redeploying tankers could take months, extending market disruption well into 2027. It also warns that Europe's reliance on imported oil, with the European Union importing 97% of its crude, could become a long-term vulnerability.
The Islamic Development Bank Group officially kicked off its 2026 annual meetings in Baku today. Top financial leaders from 57 member nations have gathered to drive regional integration and discuss global trends, ranging from artificial intelligence to the surging $3 trillion halal economy.
The energy here at the Baku Congress Center is amazing today. The Islamic Development Bank Group has officially kicked off its 2026 annual meetings. It's been 16 years since Baku last hosted this major event back in 2010, and today top ministers and financial leaders from 57 member countries are back here to discuss regional integration for sustainable prosperity. Over the next few days, the schedule is packed with big events, including official board meetings, a fireside chat with the bank's president, a governor's dialogue, and special forums for the private sector. A huge highlight today was the Azerbaijan Halal Business Forum. Speakers stressed that to fully unlock this potential, countries need to work together on shared standards and Islamic finance. Experts from the bank's Excellence Center in Kuala Lumpur backed this up, noting that Muslim consumers spending in this sector will soon clear the $3 trillion mark. To prepare for this future, they officially launched the Global Islamic economy program here today. On top of that, Azerbaijan is also moving fast on infrastructure. On the sidelines of the meeting, officials met with the leadership of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank to talk about new joint projects that will boost Azerbaijan's role as a major transit hub. This global gathering is just getting started, and the event here at the Congress Center will continue until June 19th. And that's all for now. This is Leyla Rahimli with Ilkin Mehdiyev for A News.
To discuss the significance of this event, its implications for regional cooperation and Azerbaijan's role in shaping development agendas across the global south, I'm pleased to be joined by Gaiser Nawab, chairman of Belt and Road Initiative for Sustainable Development from Islamabad, Pakistan. Mr. Nawab, welcome to the program and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Mr. Nawab, what is the overall significance of the Islamic Development Bank Group choosing Baku as the host city for its 2026 annual meetings?
This is now very important to discuss particularly Baku and these international events happening in Baku. First of all, I would like to congratulate the leadership of the Republic of Azerbaijan, particularly the President, Excellency Ilham Aliyev, and of course the leadership of the Islamic Development Bank on this successful commencement of the 2026 Islamic Development Bank annual meeting, which is just commenced in Baku after around 15 and 16 years. The last was happened in 2010. And the meeting itself are bringing around 2,000 participants from 27 member countries. The theme of this year event is particularly very important, which is regional integration for sustainable prosperity. And with this theme is very timely because the current world is facing a lot of economic uncertainty, climate challenges, and growing demands for sustainable development, and particularly in food security and youth challenges related to the jobs, and particularly some other some energy-related issues as well, and innovation and AI, which we just signed previous reports. And but Azerbaijan itself has shown a lot of importance, and it's shown a lot of seriousness when it comes to the international events. But particularly, we need to go a little back. Just recently, we saw that the Urban Forum held in Baku, and then COP29, the major event held in Baku, and then previously we have seen during the COVID that the non-aligned movement chairmanship was very much actively taken seriously by the President Ilham Aliyev, and several events were held in Baku under the non-alignment movement membership chairmanship as well. So Azerbaijan is actually creating a platform, particularly Baku itself, as a bridge connecting Asia, Europe, now Middle East, and Central Asia. That makes Baku a natural venue for such high-level event. And over the past years, it has shown strong diplomatic leadership and organizational capacity by successfully hosting such international gatherings, which I just mentioned. And there's also further cementing its position as a hub for dialogue and economic cooperation.
Mr. Nawab, what concrete outcomes should participants hope to see emerge from these meetings beyond the official declarations and speeches?
These meetings are particularly mostly for discussing the new and particularly for the next 10 years agendas from 2026 to 2035, and which is brought by the Islamic Development Group. And such events has a strong importance when multilateral development institutions from the global south who are supporting infrastructure, education, healthcare, food security, trade, finance, and poverty reductions are brought under one roof and can discuss and can cooperate in multi dimensions of such issues that the current world is facing, particularly our part of the world, the global south, the developing countries, the least developing countries, and the Islamic countries as well, after such regional wars that are happening mostly in the Islamic world. So, it's focused also on the regional integration, it is also particularly relevant today. Is no country can achieve sustainable prosperity in isolation. So the world is now more interconnected. if we are talking about the latest technologies, the AI, the blockchain. So everything is connected to each other. I think stronger connectivity, trade corridors, digital partnerships, and energy cooperation are essential for creating jobs as well, which these events and these meetings are strongly focused on. They are attracting investment as well, and also enhancing the resilience against global shocks like climate change and some other human-made shocks as well.
Mr. Nawab, the Islamic Development Bank has increasingly emphasized private sector engagement. What role can private investment play in accelerating development and reducing dependence on public financing?
Personally, in Pakistan, in one of the province in Pakistan, which is Sindh province, they have proven itself as one of the best model of the public-private partnership. And this model is now what Islamic Development Bank is discussing is more like multilateral organization plus private partnership. So I think this new model is going to be much challenging as well, but at the same time, it can be the best model for other multilateral organizations, including the United Nations and some other like OIC as well. How the private sectors can jointly working with the multilateral, like several governments, you can say. And actually, it's also challenging when it comes to the local laws and policies as well. So I don't think so it's so easy, but it's a new topic and it's a private investment in cooperation with the multilateral organization, the laws and the policies and global policies and then the local policies, how it will be implemented. Then it can be also seen on another ways as well. How will be the transparency and accountability of such as. But I think the Islamic development for now is just propagating that we should encourage the private partnership, but within the governments. Like, for example, the private partnership within a member of the Islamic Development Bank member country. But I think this can also be expand to private partnership with the multilateral, you can say international governmental organizations, joint partnerships for the common goals.
And digital transformation and innovation are becoming major development drivers. How are Islamic Development Bank member countries adapting to this rapidly changing landscape?
So I think Islamic Development Bank need to more focus on young population when it comes to the digital transformation. These days the digital economy is, you can say that digital innovation is purely among the young hands and young minds. And the Islamic Development Bank in the member countries hold around 60% of the population is the young people. And I think this greater involvement and investment on the young people can actually realize the Islamic Development Group Bank. Their main theme of this digital transformation and coping with the digital economy and coping with the digitalization. And I think this can only be possible if the focus is on greater investment on the youth entrepreneurship, artificial intelligence, digital skills, climate innovation, or even startup ecosystem. You will notice this halal economy, it's one of the biggest economy when it comes to the food economy as well, and the food chain, supply chain as well. And Islamic Development Bank Group is a lot of countries who can contribute this to not only to the member countries, but also to the non-member countries where there is a large Islamic population and many diasporas from the Islamic countries are living there. And I think this can also be linked with and channelized through this digital system as well.
Gaiser Nawab, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us. We greatly appreciate your time and expertise. It's been a pleasure having you on the program. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. And I convey my congratulations to all on this meeting.
Thanks. After the break, we'll continue with the main stories shaping the region. Stay tuned. Welcome back to News. The economic impact of the US-Iran peace agreement is under assessment. Pakistan says it could boost growth and ease energy market pressure, but it's too early to revise forecasts. Our correspondent Mariam Zia reports from Islamabad.
As governments across the region assess the economic implications of the proposed US-Iran peace agreement, Pakistan says it sees a potential upturn in growth. Finance Minister Mohammad Aurangzeb says it is too early to revise projections for the fiscal year 26-27 budget. On June 13, the national budget of Pakistan targeted 4% growth, with inflation at 8.2%, while keeping a $7 billion IMF program on track. The assessment of how the Middle East conflict impacted the country was that it pushed numbers back into double digits and disrupted supply chains through damage into regional energy infrastructure. Recovery, Aurangzeb says, will take time. The deal between US and Iran comes at a time when Pakistan is managing broader fiscal pressure. The government has increased defense spending by 18% to $10.7 billion, while seeking parliamentary approval for a third more in supplementary spending. For now, the government is holding off on changing its economic forecasts. Officials see the US-Iran agreement as reducing uncertainty around energy markets and trade flows. Whether that translates into stronger growth, however, will depend on how durable the deal proves to be and how quickly the regional supply chains recover. Mariam Zia, A News, Islamabad.
Azerbaijan and the Holy See are seeking stronger ties with inter-religious dialogue and cultural heritage among the main areas of cooperation. President Ilham Aliyev received George Jacob Kovakad, prefect of the Dicastery for Inter-Religious Dialogue of the Holy See in Baku. They discussed bilateral ties, reciprocal visits, tolerance, multiculturalism and cooperation with the Heydar Aliyev Foundation. Kovakad conveyed greetings from Pope Leo XIV and Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the Vatican Secretary of State. President Aliyev also presented him with a letter inviting Pope Leo XIV to visit Azerbaijan. Tashkent is hosting the 5th Tashkent International Investment Forum. It brings together more than 8,000 participants from 100 countries, including global investors, business leaders, and representatives of major financial institutions.
This year's forum is the largest in its history, with participating companies holding a combined value of $42 trillion in assets. The focus this year is on investment opportunities in energy, critical minerals, infrastructure, artificial intelligence, and finance. The investment forum has become one of Central Asia's leading investment platforms. Last year alone, it concluded with a record $30.5 billion worth of investment and trade agreements. One of the key events on the sidelines was the Uzbekistan-United States Business Forum. Officials say 193 American companies are participating this year, the largest U.S. business delegation ever represented at a bilateral economic event with Uzbekistan. Discussions focused on expanding cooperation in investment, technology, and job creation. Another notable session focused on Islamic finance and the growing role of Gulf capital in emerging economies. It comes just months after Uzbekistan adopted landmark legislation establishing a legal framework for Islamic banking and finance. The reforms allow banks to offer Sharia-compliant financial products and are expected to attract more than $1 billion in new investment. Experts say these changes could strengthen Uzbekistan's position as a future hub for Islamic finance in Central Asia. It could also open new financing opportunities for infrastructure and business development. The forum continues through June 18 with dozens of business meetings, investment presentations, and bilateral forums, expected to generate new partnerships and investment agreements for Uzbekistan's economy. It is Cyril Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
Kazakhstan is betting big on artificial intelligence. The government has signed a $10 billion agreement package with American tech companies Firebird and NVIDIA to build a major AI infrastructure hub. The project aims to turn the industrial city of Eski-Bastus into a center for global data processing and AI computing. Our correspondent Fariza Kalimursana has more.
Kazakhstan has signed the $10 billion agreement package with U.S. tech companies Firebird and NVIDIA to build what could become one of Central Asia's largest AI infrastructure hubs in the industrial city of Ekibastuz. The project will be developed in northeastern Kazakhstan, a region long associated with coal mining and power generation. But the authorities now want to turn it into a global computing hub using energy produced in the region to power large-scale artificial intelligence infrastructure. The plan is to build the data center valley powered by high-performance NVIDIA-based servers. The agreements we signed following talks between Kazakh officials and representatives of NVIDIA and Firebird. Under the deal, Kazakhstan will fully finance construction and infrastructure, and Firebird will supply server equipment and help attract major global technology companies. The project will be implemented in 2 phases. The first is expected to use more than 100 megawatts of power, while total capacity is projected to reach at least 300 megawatts, with potential expansion to 1 gigawatt.
It all starts with energy. If you don't have energy, then you can't do the rest of it. That is the foundation, and that is your ceiling. You can't go past the amount of development that you would like to if you don't have more energy. Kazakhstan is blessed with energy. Because you have abundant energy and you can produce more, you are a great place to start. Actually, Kazakhstan can participate at every layer of this 5-layer cake.
Officials say the goal is to turn electricity generated in Kazakhstan's coal region into exportable digital services, from AI computing power to global data processing for international companies. And according to government estimates, the project could generate at least $3 billion in annual export revenue, create new jobs, attract global tech players, and strengthen Kazakhstan's ambitions to become one of Eurasia's leading digital hubs. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
This concludes our news update for the hour. Thank you for your time and stay tuned to A News for more updates.